I grabbed my son's phone to plug it in for charging, and the notification glowing on the screen made my breath catch in my throat. My 5-year-old boy Frank had sent someone a text message that read, "Good night, Daddy, love you with all hearts," and that message had gone straight to Dr. Jasper Quinn. Jasper, the young and ridiculously attractive pediatrician who'd moved to our small town 3 months ago, the one whose smile kept me awake at night replaying our brief conversations over and over. I'd convinced myself 100 times that this was just a harmless crush, an innocent attraction that would fade with time, but this text had just changed everything. The next morning, as I drove to the clinic, my heart pounded so violently in my chest that I was certain Frank could hear it from the back seat. When we arrived at the waiting room, I expected the usual routine where the nurse would call us in, but instead Jasper himself stepped out and locked eyes with me. "Carter," he said my name with such unexpected gentleness that goosebumps rippled across my skin. "I'd like to personally make sure everything's okay today." I managed an awkward smile and took Frank's hand as we walked into the examination room together. The air felt different somehow, charged with something I couldn't quite name. During the checkup, Jasper knelt down to Frank's eye level and asked with genuine curiosity, "Buddy, can you tell me why you sent me that message last night?" Frank answered with the innocent honesty only a child possesses. "Because Papa always says you're really nice and I want you to be my other daddy." I immediately grabbed Frank's hand and started apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Quinn. Kids don't understand what they're saying sometimes." But Jasper looked at me then, and there was something entirely different in his eyes. Something that felt challenging, playful, and dangerously inviting all at once. "Carter," he said quietly, while leaning casually against his desk, "maybe Frank isn't wrong about this. Maybe you need someone who can take care of you too." I fell silent because in that exact moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same simple existence it had been before. As we were leaving, Jasper pressed his business card into my palm and said in a voice that felt like velvet, "After clinic hours, if you ever need to talk about anything at all, just call me, Carter." And when he spoke my name that second time, I felt like someone had reached directly into my chest and touched something I'd kept locked away for far too long. I spent the entire drive home in a daze, barely registering Frank's excited chatter about the stickers Dr. Jasper had given him. My mind kept replaying that moment when our eyes met, when something unspoken passed between us that felt more intimate than any conversation I'd had in years. I'd been alone for so long, ever since my divorce 2 years ago when my ex-husband walked out on us without looking back. I'd built walls around my heart so high and thick that I'd convinced myself I didn't need anyone else, that Frank and I were perfectly fine on our own. But Jasper had somehow found a crack in those defenses with just a look, just a few carefully chosen words. That evening, after putting Frank to bed, I sat on my back porch with a beer I didn't really want, staring at Jasper's business card like it was some kind of forbidden artifact. The sensible part of my brain told me to throw it away, to forget about the way his gray eyes seemed to see straight through every protective layer I'd built. But another part of me, a part I'd been ignoring for too long, wanted desperately to dial that number and hear his voice again. I thought about how he'd looked at me in the examination room, how his presence made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced since before my marriage fell apart. My phone buzzed with a text message, startling me out of my thoughts. It was from an unknown number. "I hope I'm not overstepping, Carter. I got your number from Frank's patient file. I just wanted to make sure you knew that his message didn't bother me at all. In fact, it made me smile. Sleep well, Jasper." My hands trembled slightly as I read and reread those words, trying to decode every possible meaning behind them. He'd reached out first, crossed a professional boundary that doctors weren't supposed to cross, and somehow that made everything feel more real and terrifying. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on something simple. "Thank you for being so understanding. He really looks up to you." But before I could send it, another message came through from Jasper. "I think Frank has good instincts about people. He certainly chose the right person to call Papa." The warmth that spread through my chest at those words was dangerous, intoxicating, and I knew I was standing at the edge of something that could either heal me or break me all over again. I finally sent my reply, adding just 4 more words. "Maybe we could talk tomorrow?" His response came immediately, "I'd like that very much." I sat there in the darkness, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of traffic, wondering what I was getting myself into. Part of me wanted to run, to protect Frank and myself from the possibility of more heartbreak. But another part of me, the part that had been dormant for so long, was already imagining what it might feel like to let someone in again, to trust someone new with the fragile pieces of my carefully reconstructed life. I went to bed that night with my mind racing, replaying every moment of our interaction at the clinic. The way Jasper had looked at me wasn't just professional concern or casual friendliness. There was something deeper there, something that made my pulse quicken and my carefully maintained composure threaten to crumble. I'd been so focused on being strong for Frank, on proving to myself and everyone else that I didn't need a partner to build a good life, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to want something just for myself. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered if Jasper was lying awake too, thinking about the same moment that had shifted everything between us. I wondered if he could sense how terrified I was of opening my heart again and whether he'd have the patience to wait while I figured out if I was brave enough to try. Frank's accidental text message had opened a door I'd thought was permanently sealed shut, and now I had to decide whether I was willing to walk through it or slam it closed forever. Tomorrow would bring answers, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd find out if this feeling was mutual or if I'd been reading far too much into a few kind words from a compassionate doctor. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Something had begun tonight that neither of us could easily walk away from. 2 days passed before I heard from Jasper again, and I'd nearly convinced myself that our text exchange had been a one-time thing, a momentary lapse in professional judgment that he'd regretted. I was in my kitchen attempting to cook dinner when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Frank was absorbed in his cartoons in the living room, so I wiped my hands on a towel and went to answer the door. Standing on my front porch was Jasper, dressed in casual jeans and a black sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking, holding a pizza box in one hand and a colorful bag from the toy store in the other. My brain short-circuited for a moment as I tried to process this unexpected visit. "Jasper?" I managed to say, my voice coming out more surprised than I'd intended. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" He smiled that devastating smile that had been haunting my dreams and said, "I remembered Frank mentioning that dinosaur toy he saw in my office last week, so I picked one up for him. And I may have heard through the grapevine that you're not exactly a master chef, so I brought backup dinner." I tried to suppress a laugh, but failed completely, my heart beating so fast I was sure he could see my pulse jumping in my throat. Frank heard Jasper's voice and came running from the living room, practically launching himself at our visitor with pure joy. "Dr. Jasper, you came to our house." Jasper caught him easily and lifted him up, and watching them interact made something in my chest tighten painfully. It had been so long since Frank had a positive male figure in his life, so long since anyone had shown us this kind of casual affection and care. My ex-husband had been emotionally absent long before he physically left, and seeing Jasper naturally connect with my son brought up feelings I wasn't prepared to handle. We ate pizza together at my small dining table, and Frank dominated the conversation with his enthusiastic stories about kindergarten and his favorite dinosaurs. Jasper listened attentively, asking questions and genuinely engaging with my son's rambling narratives in a way that made me realize how starved we'd both been for this kind of attention. After dinner, Frank wanted to show Jasper his room and all his toys, and I stood in the doorway watching them play together, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake by allowing this man into our carefully balanced world. Once Frank was finally exhausted and tucked into bed, Jasper and I found ourselves standing on my small balcony, each holding a mug of coffee, the night air cool against our skin. The silence between us felt heavy with unspoken questions and possibilities. Finally, Jasper turned to me and asked, "Carter, when was the last time you did something just for yourself? When was the last time you let yourself want something that wasn't about being Frank's father?" I took a long sip of coffee to buy myself time before answering. "Jasper, I need you to understand something. I'm not just a single dad trying to figure things out. I'm someone who got completely destroyed by a failed marriage. Someone who had to rebuild his entire life from nothing while taking care of a toddler. I can't afford to make mistakes or take risks that might affect Frank's stability." My voice cracked slightly on those last words, revealing more vulnerability than I'd intended. Jasper set his coffee mug down on the balcony railing and moved closer to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. something woodsy and clean that made my head spin. "Carter," he said softly, his eyes never leaving mine, "do you want to know why I really came here tonight? Why I've been thinking about you constantly since that first appointment 3 months ago." I couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at him as he continued. "When Frank sent me that text, it wasn't just cute or funny. It felt like permission, like the universe was telling me to stop being a coward and actually pursue what I've wanted since the moment I met you." My mouth went dry as I processed his words. "You've wanted—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. Jasper nodded slowly, taking another small step closer until we were almost touching. "I've wanted to know you, Carter, not just as Frank's father or as my patient's guardian, but as the man who makes my heart race every time I see your name on my appointment schedule. The man who looks at his son with such fierce love and protection that it makes me wonder what it would feel like to have even a fraction of that directed at me." I should have stepped back, should have created some distance and reminded him about professional boundaries and the complications of dating your child's doctor. But instead, I found myself asking, "What are you saying, Jasper? What do you actually want from me?" His hand reached up slowly, giving me plenty of time to move away, and gently touched the side of my face. "I want to take you to dinner, just the two of us. I want to learn everything about you that I can't discover in a clinical setting. I want to prove to you that not everyone will leave, that some people actually stay when things get complicated." The touch of his hand against my skin was electric, sending shivers down my spine despite the warmth of the evening. "I'm terrified," I admitted in a whisper. "It's been so long since someone looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. I don't even know if I remember how to do this, how to let someone in without completely falling apart." Jasper's thumb brushed gently across my cheekbone as he said, "Then we'll figure it out together slowly. No pressure, no expectations beyond seeing where this connection between us might lead. I'm not asking you to trust me with everything right away, Carter. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I'm worth the risk." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his hand against my face, the solid reality of his presence in my space. When I opened them again, I saw nothing but sincerity and patience in his expression. "One dinner," I finally said, my voice barely audible. "We can try one dinner and see how it feels." The smile that broke across Jasper's face was radiant, transforming his already handsome features into something almost breathtaking. "One dinner," he agreed, his hand slowly dropping away from my face, though I immediately missed the warmth of his touch. We stood there for a few more minutes, neither of us quite ready to break the spell of the moment. Finally, Jasper said he should probably go, that he had early appointments the next morning. I walked him to the door, hyper-aware of every inch of space between us. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Carter. I promise I won't make you regret it." As I watched him drive away, I leaned against the closed door and wondered if I'd just made the best decision of my life, or set myself up for another devastating heartbreak. Only time would tell, but for the first time in years I felt genuinely excited about the possibility of something new. Over the next week, Jasper became a regular presence in our lives, though we hadn't yet had our official dinner date. He'd stop by after work with takeout food, claiming he was in the neighborhood, and Frank would light up like a Christmas tree every time he saw Jasper's car pull into our driveway. I watched them build blanket forts and play elaborate make-believe games, and each interaction made it harder to maintain my emotional distance. There was something deeply appealing about seeing Jasper so naturally comfortable with my son, so genuinely invested in making Frank laugh and feel special. On Thursday evening, Jasper surprised us with an invitation to his place for the weekend. "I have a small farmhouse about an hour outside the city," he explained while Frank bounced excitedly around us. "There's plenty of space to run around, some horses in the stable next door, and I thought it might be nice for you both to get out of town for a bit." I hesitated, knowing that accepting this invitation would be crossing another threshold in whatever was developing between us. But Frank's pleading eyes made the decision for me, and I found myself agreeing before I could overthink it. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, and we drove out to Jasper's property with Frank chattering nonstop about horses and adventures. When we pulled up to the farmhouse, I was struck by its charm, a restored old building with a wraparound porch and gardens that looked carefully maintained. Jasper was waiting outside, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt that made him look entirely different from the polished doctor I usually saw. He showed us around the property and Frank was absolutely mesmerized by the 2 horses grazing in the nearby pasture. Jasper arranged for Frank to ride one of the gentler horses with supervision from the stable owner, and I stood at the fence watching my son's face transform with pure delight. Jasper came to stand beside me, our shoulders almost touching, and said quietly, "He's a great kid, Carter. You've done an amazing job raising him on your own." I felt unexpected tears prick at my eyes because I so rarely received validation for the hard work of single parenthood. Some days I'm not sure I'm doing enough. I admit, I worry constantly that he's missing out on things because I can't give him everything he deserves. Jasper turned to look at me directly, his expression serious. "Carter, Frank has something more valuable than anything money can buy. He has a parent who shows up for him every single day, who puts his needs first, who loves him unconditionally. That's not something to dismiss or minimize." His words struck something deep inside me, and I had to look away before I embarrassed myself by actually crying. We spent the afternoon exploring the property, and by the time evening came, Frank was exhausted and happy in equal measure. After settling Frank in the guest bedroom with his favorite stuffed dinosaur, Jasper and I found ourselves alone in the living room where a fire crackled in the stone fireplace. He offered me a glass of wine and I accepted, settling onto the comfortable couch while trying to calm my racing thoughts. The atmosphere felt different now that it was just the 2 of us, more intimate and charged with possibility. Jasper sat down beside me, close but not quite touching, and for a while we just sat in comfortable silence watching the flames dance. "Carter," Jasper finally said, setting his wine glass on the coffee table, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me." I turned to face him fully, my heart already starting to pound with anticipation. He continued, "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt badly, and I understand why you're hesitant to trust someone new. But I need you to know that when I look at you and Frank, I don't see a burden or a complication. I see the possibility of something real, something worth fighting for." I gripped my wineglass tighter, trying to find the right words. "Jasper, my biggest fear isn't about me getting hurt again. I've survived that before and I can survive it again if I have to. What terrifies me is the thought of Frank getting attached to you, of him starting to see you as a permanent part of his life, and then having you disappear. He's already been abandoned by one father figure. I can't let that happen to him again." Jasper reached over and gently took the wineglass from my hands, setting it aside before taking both of my hands in his. "I understand that fear, and I respect it. But Carter, I need you to do something. What if I don't disappear? What if I'm the person who actually stays, who shows up consistently, who proves through actions and not just words that I'm committed to both of you?" His hands were warm around mine, grounding me even as his words made my defenses crack further. "How can you possibly know that?" I asked, my voice coming out more desperate than I'd intended. "How can you be so certain when we barely know each other?" Jasper squeezed my hands gently and said, "Because I've never felt this way before, Carter. I've dated people, I've had relationships, but I've never met someone who made me want to completely reorganize my life to make space for them. When I'm with you and Frank, I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was searching for." The vulnerability in his voice matched what I was feeling, and I realized we were both taking enormous risks here. "I want to believe you," I whispered. "I want to trust that this could actually work. But I'm so tired of being disappointed, so tired of hoping for things that never materialize." Jasper moved closer, releasing my hands only to cup my face between his palms. "Then let me prove it to you," he said softly. "Give me the chance to show you that I mean every word I'm saying." Before I could respond, my phone rang, shattering the moment. I pulled it from my pocket and saw a name I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Dylan, my ex-husband. My face must have gone pale because Jasper immediately asked, "What's wrong? Who is it?" I showed him the screen, my hands starting to shake slightly. "It's Frank's biological father. He hasn't contacted us since the divorce was finalized." I let it go to voicemail, but seconds later a notification popped up indicating he'd left a message. With trembling fingers, I played the voicemail on speaker. Dylan's voice came through, shaky and urgent. "Carter, I know I have no right to call you after all this time, but we need to talk. It's about Frank. I've been getting help, working through things, and I want to discuss visitation arrangements. Please call me back as soon as you can. This is important." The message ended and I sat there feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Jasper's arm came around my shoulders, pulling me against him protectively. "Carter, whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone," he said firmly. But I could barely hear him over the roaring in my ears, over the panic that was starting to build in my chest. After 2 years of silence, Dylan wanted back into our lives, and I had no idea how to handle that. I'd finally started to imagine a future that included Jasper, started to believe that maybe I could have something good again, and now everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. I looked up at Jasper, seeing the concern and determination in his eyes, and made a decision. "Stay with me through this," I said quietly. "Whatever happens with Dylan, whatever complications arise, I need to know you're serious about not running away when things get difficult." Jasper pressed a kiss to my forehead and said without hesitation, "I'm not going anywhere, Carter. We'll face this together." And despite all my fears and doubts, I chose to believe him. The next morning I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach that refused to loosen. Dylan's voicemail had played on repeat in my mind all night, interrupting any chance of restful sleep. Jasper had stayed over on the couch, insisting he wouldn't leave me alone to deal with this crisis. And when I stumbled into the kitchen at dawn, I found him already awake and making coffee. The domestic simplicity of the scene, this man I was falling for standing in my kitchen like he belonged there, almost made me forget the storm that was coming. "I think we should meet with him," I said without preamble, accepting the mug Jasper handed me. "Dylan, I need to hear what he has to say face to face before I can figure out how to handle this." Jasper nodded thoughtfully, leaning against the counter. "Do you want me there with you?" he asked carefully, clearly trying not to overstep. I didn't even have to think about my answer. "Yes, I need you there. This affects all of us now, and I don't want to face him alone." We arranged to meet Dylan at a small cafe on the edge of town, neutral territory where neither of us had any history. I'd asked my neighbor to watch Frank for a few hours, not wanting him anywhere near this conversation until I understood what Dylan actually wanted. As we drove to the meeting, Jasper reached over and laced his fingers through mine, a simple gesture of solidarity that helped steady my racing heart. Dylan was already seated when we arrived, looking markedly different from the last time I'd seen him. He'd cut his hair shorter, lost some weight, and wore an expression of genuine nervousness that seemed foreign on his usually confident face. When he spotted us walking in together, his eyes widened slightly at the sight of Jasper beside me, but he stood to greet us anyway. "Carter," he said formally, then nodded at Jasper. "I wasn't expecting you to bring someone." "This is Dr. Jasper Quinn," I said evenly, sliding into the booth across from Dylan while Jasper settled protectively beside me. "He's Frank's pediatrician and someone very important in our lives. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of him." Under the table, Jasper's hand found mine, squeezing gently in support. Dylan's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded in acceptance. "Carter, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after the way I left," Dylan began, his fingers nervously tapping against his coffee cup. "I was a coward who ran away when things got hard, and I abandoned you and our son when you needed me most. I've spent the last 2 years in therapy working through my issues, and I've come to understand how badly I failed as a husband and as a father." His voice cracked on those last words. And despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy, but sympathy wasn't enough to erase 2 years of silence and pain. "Dylan, you didn't just leave when things got hard," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You disappeared completely. You didn't call on Frank's birthday. You didn't send child support. You didn't even bother to ask if he was okay. So forgive me if I'm skeptical about this sudden desire to be involved in his life." Dylan flinched at my words but didn't look away. "You're right to be angry. You're right to doubt me. But I'm asking you to look at the documentation from my therapist, the proof that I've been working on myself. I'm not asking to take Frank away from you, Carter. I just want the chance to be part of his life, to show him that I'm trying to be better." He slid a folder across the table containing therapy records, character references, and what looked like a detailed plan for gradual reintroduction into Frank's life. Before I could respond, Jasper spoke up, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Dylan, I appreciate that you're seeking help and trying to improve yourself. But you need to understand something crucial here. Frank has built a stable, happy life with Carter. He's thriving in school, he has friends, he feels secure and loved. Whatever arrangements you're hoping for need to prioritize Frank's emotional well-being above your own need for redemption. Dylan's expression hardened as he looked at Jasper. With all due respect, Doctor, this is a family matter. You're not Frank's father and you don't get to make decisions about my son. The possessive way he said my son made my blood boil, and I saw Jasper's jaw clench in response. But when Jasper spoke again, his voice remained controlled and measured. You're right that I'm not Frank's biological father, Jasper said, meeting Dylan's challenging gaze head-on. But I'm the one who reads him bedtime stories every night. I'm the one who bandages his scraped knees and helps him with his homework. I'm the one who shows up consistently and proves through my actions that I care about his happiness. So while I may not have legal rights, I absolutely have earned the right to advocate for what's best for him. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I knew I needed to intervene before this escalated further. Dylan, here's what's going to happen, I said firmly, drawing both men's attention back to me. I'll review these documents and consult with a family lawyer. If everything checks out and if my lawyer agrees that supervised visits would be appropriate, then we can discuss a very gradual reintroduction. But this happens on my timeline, not yours. And if you try to push for more than I'm comfortable with, if you try to take me to court or force this issue, then you'll get nothing. Do you understand? Dylan looked like he wanted to argue, his mouth opening and closing several times before he finally nodded. I understand. Thank you for even considering it, Carter. That's more than I deserve. He stood up, clearly recognizing that the conversation was over. I'll wait to hear from your lawyer. As he walked away, I felt the adrenaline that had been keeping me upright suddenly drain away, leaving me exhausted and shaky. Jasper immediately wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. You handled that perfectly, he murmured against my hair. You were strong and clear about your boundaries. I'm proud of you. We sat there for a few more minutes, neither of us rushing to leave, and I let myself lean into his solid warmth and steady presence. But when we finally made it back to my house, there was an envelope wedged in my front door, a legal document with the county courthouse seal. My hands trembled as I opened it, already knowing what I'd find inside. Dylan had filed for joint custody, complete with a court date scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The papers slipped from my fingers and scattered across the porch, and I felt my knees buckle under the weight of this betrayal. Jasper caught me before I could fall, holding me upright with his strength when mine had completely abandoned me. He lied. I choked out, tears of rage and fear streaming down my face. He sat there and talked about taking things slowly, about respecting my timeline, and he'd already filed the paperwork. He played me. The sense of violation was overwhelming. The feeling that I'd been manipulated and outmaneuvered by someone who knew exactly how to exploit my willingness to believe people could change. Carter, look at me, Jasper commanded gently, cupping my face in his hands and forcing me to meet his eyes. We're going to fight this. We're going to get you the best family lawyer in the state. And we're going to show the court exactly who's been Frank's real parent all along. You are not going to lose your son. I won't let that happen. The fierce determination in his voice cut through my panic, grounding me in the reality that I wasn't facing this alone. I pressed my forehead against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to calm my racing heart. I'm so scared, Jasper. What if the court decides that Frank needs his biological father in his life? What if they don't care that Dylan abandoned us? Jasper's arms tightened around me, and when he spoke, his voice was absolute in its certainty. Then we make them care. We document everything, every night you've been there, every sacrifice you've made, every moment of love and dedication you've poured into raising Frank. Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Carter, you are Frank's father in every way that matters, and we're going to prove that beyond any shadow of doubt. His conviction helped quiet the screaming panic in my mind, and I clung to him like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. That night, after Frank was safely asleep and unaware of the legal battle looming over his future, Jasper and I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by legal documents and notes. He'd called in a favor from a colleague who specialized in family law, and we had an appointment scheduled for the next morning. As I watched Jasper methodically organizing everything, creating a timeline of Dylan's absence and my consistent presence in Frank's life. I felt something shift inside me, a deepening of what I felt for this man who had so completely stepped up when I needed him most. "Jasper," I said quietly, making him look up from the papers. "Why are you doing all of this? Why are you putting yourself through this mess when you could just walk away and avoid all this drama?" He set down his pen and reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "'Cause you're worth fighting for, Carter. 'Cause Frank deserves to have people in his life who won't give up when things get difficult. And because somewhere along the way, you two became my family and I protect what's mine." The possessive warmth in those last words sent a shiver through me, and I realized that despite everything falling apart around us, I'd never felt more certain about letting someone into my heart. Whatever happened with Dylan in the custody battle, I knew with absolute clarity that Jasper Quinn was someone who would stand beside me through anything. The custody battle consumed our lives in ways I'd never imagined possible. Every free moment was spent with lawyers, gathering documentation, preparing testimonies, and trying desperately to maintain some sense of normalcy for Frank. The court-appointed child psychologist came to observe our home life, asking questions and taking notes while I tried not to let my anxiety show. Through it all, Jasper remained a constant presence, attending meetings when his schedule allowed, helping Frank with homework and holding me together when I felt like I was falling apart. 3 weeks into the legal proceedings, I hit my breaking point. It was late at night and I was sitting on my bedroom floor surrounded by papers, bank statements proving I'd paid for everything Frank needed, school records showing my involvement in his education, character references from teachers and neighbors. The sheer volume of evidence required to prove I was a good father felt like an indictment of the system itself. Shouldn't my daily presence and love be enough? Why did I have to justify my role in my own son's life? The tears came suddenly and violently, great heaving sobs that I'd been holding back for weeks. I heard Jasper's footsteps in the hallway. He'd taken to staying over most nights now, sleeping on the couch to be available whenever I needed him. He appeared in my doorway within seconds, his expression shifting from concern to immediate action as he crossed the room and gathered me into his arms. "I can't do this anymore," I gasped out between sobs, clutching at his shirt like it was the only thing keeping me from drowning. "It's too much, Jasper. The stress is killing me and I'm terrified that no matter what I do, it won't be enough. What if the judge sides with Dylan? What if they think Frank needs his biological father more than he needs stability?" The words poured out in a torrent of fear and exhaustion. Jasper held me tighter, one hand cradling the back of my head while the other rubbed soothing circles on my back. "Carter, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice steady and "You are the strongest person I've ever met. You've raised an incredible child on your own, worked full-time and never once complained about the sacrifices you've had to make. Frank is happy, healthy, and thriving because of you. No judge who actually looks at the evidence could possibly conclude otherwise." I pulled back slightly to look at his face, seeing nothing but absolute belief shining in those gray eyes. "How can you be so sure?" I asked, my voice cracking with vulnerability. "How can you have so much faith when I'm completely falling apart?" Jasper cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away my tears. "Because I see you, Carter. I see who you really are. Not just the scared single father worried about losing his son, but the incredible man who keeps showing up day after day despite being exhausted and overwhelmed. That's the person the judge will see too." Then he did something unexpected. He leaned forward and kissed me soft and tender, pouring comfort and strength into that connection between us. The kiss shifted something fundamental inside me, breaking through the last of my carefully maintained walls. When we finally pulled apart, I found myself whispering the truth I'd been afraid to acknowledge. "I love you, Jasper." I didn't want to say it during all this chaos, didn't want you to think I was just clinging to you because I needed support. But it's true, I'm completely in love with you. Jasper's expression transformed, becoming radiant with joy even as tears gathered in his eyes. "I've been waiting to hear you say that," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been in love with you since that first appointment when Frank tried to climb the examination table and you caught him with this look of pure devotion on your face. I looked at you both and thought, that's what I want. That's home." We held each other on my bedroom floor, surrounded by legal documents and evidence of our fight, And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than crushing anxiety. I felt hope, not because the legal battle was over or because I had any guarantees about the outcome, but because I'd finally admitted to myself and to Jasper that whatever happened, I wanted him beside me for all of it. The final custody hearing arrived faster than I was ready for. I'd prepared my testimony with the help of our lawyer, practiced staying calm under pressure, and tried to present myself as the stable, capable parent I knew I was. Dylan presented his case first. The therapy records, the stable job he'd secured, the apartment he'd rented with a bedroom ready for Frank. He spoke about wanting to make amends, to be the father he should have been from the beginning. When it was my turn, I walked through the timeline of Frank's life, every milestone, every challenge, every moment of joy and difficulty that I'd navigated alone. I presented the financial records showing that I'd supported Frank entirely on my own, the medical records documenting every appointment and illness, the school records proving my involvement in his education. But more than the documentation, I spoke about the intangible things, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees kissed better, the nightmares soothed away, the unconditional love I'd poured into raising my son. Then came Jasper's testimony as a character witness. He took the stand with quiet confidence, and when asked to describe his relationship with our family, he spoke with such genuine affection that I saw several people in the courtroom visibly moved. "Your Honor, I've had the privilege of watching Carter parent Frank for several months now," Jasper said, his professional demeanor firmly in place. "What I've observed is a father who puts his child's needs above everything else, who sacrifices his own comfort and desires to ensure Frank feels loved and secure. Carter doesn't just provide for Frank materially, he's present emotionally, mentally, and spiritually in ways that can't be quantified in documents." The judge asked Jasper about his professional opinion regarding stability and attachment, and Jasper's response was measured but powerful. "From a medical and developmental standpoint, Frank has formed a secure attachment with Carter. He's meeting all his developmental milestones, he's socially well-adjusted, and he demonstrates none of the behavioral issues we'd expect to see in a child experiencing trauma or neglect. While I respect Dylan's desire to be involved in his son's life, any changes to Frank's primary custody arrangement should be approached with extreme caution. Children Frank's age need consistency and predictability above all else." The most critical moment came when the judge called Frank for a private interview in chambers. I'd been dreading this, worried about what pressure Dylan might have tried to apply or what confusion Frank might express about the situation. Jasper squeezed my hand as Frank was led away, and we sat in agonizing silence waiting for him to return. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours, each second stretching into eternity while I imagined every possible outcome. When the judge finally returned and called the court back to order, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, the judge began, looking between Dylan and me, and after speaking with Frank himself, "I'm prepared to issue my ruling." The silence in the courtroom was absolute, everyone holding their breath waiting for the decision that would determine my son's future. "Mr. Williams," the judge said, addressing Dylan, "I acknowledge your efforts towards self-improvement and your stated desire to be involved in your son's life. However, the court cannot ignore 2 years of complete absence, followed by sudden interest coinciding with documented stability in the child's current environment. The court finds that while you may have certain biological rights, the best interests of the child must be paramount." I felt lightheaded, unable to process whether this was going in my favor or not. The judge turned to me and I stopped breathing entirely. "Mr. Carter Williams, the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that you have been Frank's primary caregiver, provider, and source of emotional stability throughout his life. Frank himself expressed clear preference to remain in your primary custody, and the child psychologist's report supports that this arrangement serves his best interests." Relief crashed over me like a wave. But the judge wasn't finished. "Therefore, the court awards primary physical custody to Carter Williams. Mr. Dylan Williams will be granted supervised visitation rights, beginning with 2 hours every other Saturday, with the possibility of extended visits pending successful completion of continued therapy and demonstration of consistent involvement. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months." The gavel came down and suddenly Jasper's arms were around me as I collapsed against him, tears of relief streaming down my face. Outside the courthouse, I held Frank tightly while he asked questions about why everyone looked so serious and when we could go home. Jasper stood slightly apart, giving us space for this private moment, but when Frank noticed him, he broke away from me and ran to wrap his arms around Jasper's legs. "Dr. Jasper, are you coming home with us?" Frank asked innocently, and Jasper looked at me for permission before answering. "If your papa says it's okay, then yes, I'm coming home with you," Jasper replied, and the word home had never sounded more right. As we walked to the car together, me, Jasper, and Frank between us holding both our hands, I felt the crushing weight of the last few weeks finally begin to lift. We'd won. Not because we'd defeated Dylan, but because we'd proven what I'd always known, that family isn't defined by biology alone, but by the daily choice to show up and love someone unconditionally. 6 months passed in a blur of healing and adjustments. Dylan had been taking his supervised visits seriously, showing up consistently and genuinely trying to build a relationship with Frank. I watched their interactions carefully at first, protective and wary, but gradually I began to see that maybe he really was working on becoming someone who could be a positive presence in Frank's life. He would never be Frank's primary parent. That role was mine and always would be, but perhaps he could eventually be someone Frank could trust in small, manageable doses. More importantly, those 6 months allowed Jasper and me to build something real and lasting. He'd officially moved some of his belongings into my house, his clothes hanging in my closet, and his toothbrush resting next to mine in the bathroom. We'd fallen into an easy domestic rhythm that felt natural and right, cooking dinners together, helping Frank with his homework as a team, taking weekend trips to explore nearby towns. Frank had started calling Jasper by his first name instead of Quinn, a small shift that felt monumental in its significance. One evening in late autumn, Jasper told me he had reservations at an upscale restaurant downtown and had arranged for my neighbor to watch Frank for the evening. I was curious about the occasion. It wasn't my birthday or any anniversary I could think of, but Jasper just smiled mysteriously and told me to dress nicely. So I put on the one suit I owned that wasn't for court appearances and tried not to feel too nervous about whatever he had planned. The restaurant was elegant in a way I wasn't accustomed to, with soft lighting and live piano music, creating an atmosphere of quiet sophistication. Jasper looked devastatingly handsome in a dark blue suit that made his gray eyes even more striking, and I felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with nerves as we were led to a private corner table. Once we were seated with wine glasses in hand, Jasper reached across the table to take my hand, his expression serious but warm. "Carter, these last 6 months have been the happiest of my entire life," he began, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Waking up next to you, having breakfast with you and Frank, coming home to you both at the end of long days. It's everything I never knew I was missing. You've given me the family I'd stopped believing I could have." His words made my chest tight with emotion, and I squeezed his hand in response. "Jasper, you saved us," I said quietly, my voice thick with feeling. "You showed up when we needed someone most, and you never wavered even when things got impossibly hard. I don't know what Frank and I would have done without you." Jasper shook his head, smiling softly. "You would have been fine because you're strong enough to handle anything life throws at you. But I'm grateful every single day that I get to be here beside you anyway." Then he did something that made my heart stop. He released my hand and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that could only mean one thing. "Carter Williams," Jasper said, opening the box to reveal 2 matching silver rings, simple and elegant. "I know that legally we can't get married in this state yet, and I know that might change someday or it might not. But I don't want to wait for laws to catch up with what I already know to be true. I want to commit to you and Frank completely, and officially in every way that matters. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. That we're choosing each other every single day." His voice cracked slightly with emotion, and I realized there were tears streaming down my own face. "So I'm asking you, even without the legal paperwork, even without official recognition, will you let me be your partner in all of this? Will you wear this ring and let me wear mine as a symbol of our commitment to each other and to the family we're building together?" The question hung in the air between us, weighted with everything we'd been through and everything we hoped to become. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, couldn't find words adequate to express what I was feeling, so I just nodded vigorously while tears continued to fall. "Yes," I finally managed to choke out. Yes. Jasper, absolutely yes. I want all of that with you. Jasper stood up and came around the table, pulling me to my feet and kissing me deeply while other diners applauded around us. He slipped one of the rings onto my finger and I did the same for him, both of us laughing and crying simultaneously. The rings felt weighty and significant, a physical reminder of the promises we were making to each other. We stayed at the restaurant for another hour, talking about our future plans and dreams, but eventually we couldn't wait any longer to get home to Frank and share the news with him. When we walked through the front door, Frank was still awake despite his bedtime having passed, bouncing excitedly on the couch while my neighbor tried unsuccessfully to calm him down. The moment he saw us, he ran over and immediately noticed the rings on our hands. "What are those?" he asked with the direct curiosity of a 5-year-old, pointing at my hand. I knelt down to his eye level, Jasper crouching beside me, and said gently, "Frank, Jasper and I want to be together forever, like a real family. These rings mean we're promising to take care of each other and you for always. How do you feel about that?" I held my breath waiting for his response, hoping desperately that he'd be happy about this development. Frank looked between us, his small face scrunched up in thought, and then broke into the brightest smile I'd ever seen. "Does this mean Jasper is going to be my other dad for real? Not just pretend?" The hope in his voice made my chest ache with love for this incredible child. "Yes, buddy," Jasper answered, his own voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to be your other dad for real, and forever. Is that okay with you?" Frank threw his arms around both of us, nearly knocking us over with the force of his enthusiasm. "Yes, yes, I've been wishing for this forever," Frank exclaimed, and Jasper and I exchanged a look over his head that contained a lifetime of love and promise. After we'd gotten Frank settled into bed, which took longer than usual because he was too excited to sleep, Jasper and I finally found ourselves alone in my bedroom that had become our bedroom. We lay tangled together in the darkness, neither of us quite ready to sleep despite the late hour. "Thank you," I whispered against Jasper's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my cheek. "Thank you for choosing us, for fighting for us, for loving us even when it would have been easier to walk away." Jasper's arms tightened around me, holding me closer. "Carter, choosing you and Frank wasn't difficult at all. It was the easiest decision I've ever made," he murmured into my hair. From that very first day when Frank accidentally sent me that text message, I felt like the universe was trying to tell me something. It was telling me that you two were exactly who I'd been searching for without even knowing it. I lifted my head to kiss him properly, pouring everything I felt into that connection between us. "I love you," I said when we finally pulled apart, the words coming easier now than they had those first few times. "I love you so much it sometimes scares me because I never thought I could feel this way again after everything that happened with Dylan." Jasper's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing gently across my cheekbone. "I love you too, more than I have words to express. And I promise you, Carter, I'm never going to make you regret trusting me with your heart." The certainty in his voice settled something deep inside me, quieting the last whispers of doubt and fear that occasionally still surfaced. We made love that night with a tenderness and passion that felt like sealing the promises we'd made, like physically confirming the commitment we'd spoken aloud. Afterward, lying in the peaceful darkness with Jasper's breathing evening out as he drifted towards sleep, I reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought us to this moment. A single accidental text message from my 5-year-old son had set everything in motion, had opened the door to a love and happiness I'd stopped believing possible. Frank's innocent mistake had turned out to be the best accident of my entire life, bringing Jasper into our world and transforming us from a family of two into something stronger and more complete. I thought about how terrified I'd been that first day at the clinic, how I'd convinced myself that my attraction to Jasper was just a harmless crush that would fade with time. I thought about all the moments since then, the coffee on the balcony, the farmhouse visit, the custody battle, the countless small daily interactions that had woven our lives together. Every challenge we'd faced had only proven that what we had was real and worth fighting for. As I finally felt sleep pulling me under, I realized that I was no longer afraid of the future. Whatever came next, whether it was navigating co-parenting with Dylan, dealing with the inevitable challenges of blending our lives together, or simply managing the everyday chaos of raising a child, I knew we would face it together. Jasper had become my partner in every sense of the word. And Frank had gained a second father who would love and protect him unconditionally. The rings on our fingers caught the moonlight streaming through the window, glinting softly in the darkness. Those simple bands of silver represented everything we built and everything we promised to continue building. A family forged not by accident or biology, but by conscious choice and unwavering commitment. And as I drifted off to sleep, wrapped in Jasper's arms, I felt profoundly grateful for that one mistaken text message that had changed all of our lives forever.